today that's been coming in. And I'll show you an example of a text, the brief reading text, and then the questions, or question associated with it, and then how learners work through that, and then a little bit about the output from the system that tries to capture both what they were able to do independently, their zone of actual development, as well as what they were able to do with support and how much support. So trying to get a snapshot, at least, of their zone of proximal development. Okay? I should mention that one important part of this project was developing something like that, right? An inventory of support for each and every item on the test. Right, so the item that I want to look at, I'll show you one item on the test, is, so it was really getting at grammatical knowledge as well as discourse, right? So as we'll see, there was knowledge of negation that has to come into play, understanding verbal aspect, particularly imperfective, and then there's also a discourse relationship here between a negative clause and mais plutôt clause. And that'll make sense in just a second when I pull up the what we have here. Okay. Okay, so here is a snapshot of the text, okay, as well as the multiple choice question that goes with it. So the first thing that the student gets when they're taking the test is, here's the text, and then they can read through that, and then they have a click, and then the question appears. Now the question, as you can see, is in English, so it says, the author enjoyed these weekends, especially because he liked, and then they have these options to select from, okay? And you can click one of them and then submit your answer. So, and this is basically just sort of the person writing is remembering the weekends from when they were a young person and how they would go out into the country and spend time with their grandparents and so on, and a description of that. Okay, so let's say that we select an answer and it's not the correct answer, right? The correct answer we're looking for actually is D, right? So the author says in here, really the time that he spends with his grandfather was what was so important to him, so memorable, what he liked most about this experience. Okay, so if you get the wrong answer, right, instead of ending the test there, right, and moving on to the next item, there's another attempt. So it says, and you get feedback on this. It says, that's not the right answer. Read the text again, but pay more attention to the part that's highlighted in green. Now, in this particular text, that's a fairly substantial part. But what it does do is it eliminates this bottom section, saying not that that's not important, but that we're narrowing your focus to a particular part of the text and to see what difference that makes. Are they able to, again, rely on knowledge of negation and rely on their sort of discourse level knowledge with this mais plutôt construction and see what difference this makes? Okay? Right. Okay. Now, let's say we try again. We get another wrong answer, and it says, that's not right either. Does the author say, okay, so you have two forms of support here. One is a question cluing them in. Does the author say what he liked the most here? And it's narrowing it down to this specific sentence. Now there's still, right, you still have in this sentence a fairly complex construction, right? It's not saying, I really liked spending time with my grandparents or my grandfather, right? Instead it's saying, the thing that I liked the most was not this thing, but it was this other thing, right? Fairly sophisticated. So even though we've narrowed the focus to just this one question, it's still possible for learners to get it wrong, and indeed some do. Okay. And then finally, okay, it says that's not right either, and then again, with this, you're able to get you're able to get the partial credit for each of these. I should have mentioned this. So it was weighted, right? It was weighted so that you see if you get it right on the first attempt, you get full credit. But then you can, the computer records how many attempts it took, and then you have a score that's based on that. So here it is, and it says, okay, and you actually have sort of a translation, basically, a rendering of this in English. The author says it wasn't the animals he liked the most, but, okay. Now what's interesting here is in the event that an individual didn't get the right answer, it would come up and say the correct answer was D. But to think back to that hierarchy that that teacher had come up with to use with her Spanish students, giving the right answer itself isn't the final step of support, because that just gets you through this particular text. And it doesn't necessarily say anything beyond this. So you have an option of click to view an explanation. You don't have to, but you can. And as we've seen with some of the data coming in, some learners are doing this and some are not. And the system records that. And so if you click on the explanation, it basically just gives a statement saying what the right answer was and why. And you'll notice that there are certain key phrases in French that are included in the explanation with a rendering of that in English. So you have the key is it starts with ce que j'aimais le plus, and then what I liked the most. The author states, right, it wasn't this, but rather it was, and so on. Okay, so this is just one item, but very quickly, because I'm about out of time, what I'd like to do is to show the output. Whoops. Let's see, where is it? Here. Yeah, so the output, which we're thinking can be helpful for teachers, two types of output. So you can have an entire class output of results after this assessment, as well as an individual output. And I just put this into a PDF. The actual online version is a little bit more colorful, a little prettier. But I put it in this because I could annotate it a little bit. And so what you see here is two different types of scores. If you look, you have one column that says the mediated score and another column that says the actual score. So weighted with each item being worth a total of 4 points. Okay, and then you would, if you lose, right, you could lose 1 point if you need one form of support, right? If you need 2, then you lose 2 points, and so on. Okay, so the actual score out of 80 versus the mediated score out of 80. The difference is what you see here. So you have item numbers running along this side, as well as the number of points for given items. Now this was the first pilot that we did, and it was on a voluntary basis. We had like a half a dozen students. We've got now, I think, about 10 times that that's come in for French, and then similar numbers in Chinese and Russian. But again, this is ongoing. So what you can see here that's interesting is how many students for any item of the test were able to get full credit, and how many were able to only get partial credit, how many didn't get any credit at all because they worked through it and they just were not able to get the correct answer. Yeah? So you can get kind of in a snapshot, a teacher can look at this and see in a snapshot view, looking at my class, okay, so it looks like from here, item 1, well, my students tended to do really, really well with item 1, whereas if I look at item 2, it's a little bit different picture, right? We also have broken down some of the constructs. So if you scroll down, you'll see you've got different constructs related to which items dealt with primarily getting at lexical issues, which ones dealt primarily with grammatical issues or discourse knowledge. And looking at individuals, you can get a view of, as you'll see, this notion of people responding differently to support and needing different levels of support. Some individuals, right, didn't improve all that much. So if you look at user ID 88, so this individual gets 76 out of 80 as their actual score, where they didn't need very much support. They were able to primarily do this on their own. Another individual gets 56 out of 80 doing it independently, but with support is able to get 73 out of 80. Okay? And that's sort of towards the high end. Then you've got others who, you've got one individual here, user ID 87. This individual gets 40 out of 80 independently. But even with support, the person only gets 48 out of 80, so the person didn't benefit that much from the support. And I'll stop here, but the closing word is that what's interesting too is that you, if you click on an individual, you can then get a breakdown that shows for that individual learner which items, right, they chose, so a teacher could even analyze and look at to see which items were functioning as distractors more than others. But I'll stop here because I think I'm out of time. And then we can go back if there are questions. Okay. Thank you.